0500 hours. Coastal Sector 4. Unnamed Pacific Island. The gray light of pre-dawn struggles to penetrate the heavy banks of sea mist clinging to the water. The ocean heaves with a slow, rhythmic swell, crashing against the black volcanic sand in long, foaming lines. Inside the reinforced concrete bunkers, buried deep within the dunes, the air remains stale, cold, and heavy with the smell of wet concrete. Exhausted infantrymen lean against sandbags, their eyelids heavy from the long night watch, weapons resting idly on their knees. The only sounds are the repetitive crash of the surf and the rustle of dry palm fronds shaking in the wind. A perimeter guard wipes condensation from the lens of his thermal imager and scans the empty gray void where the sky meets the sea. The rhythmic crashing of the waves changes. A low, vibrating thrum begins to resonate through the ground, shaking the loose sand at the bottom of the trench. It starts as a whisper, but quickly builds into a chest-rattling bass note. It is not the sound of the ocean. It is the sound of industrial power. The guard stiffens. He presses the optic harder against his eye socket. Through the green static of the display, the empty horizon suddenly fractures. A massive wall of white water rises from the deep, stretching across the entire northern quadrant. The radio screams to life. The horizon erupts with violence. 3 distinct mountain-sized shapes tear through the mist, riding high on cushions of compressed air. They are heavy hovercraft, giants of the sea, charging toward the shoreline at incredible speed. Their massive rear lift fans roar like captive tornadoes, drowning out the sound of the wind and the surf. The spray from their rubber skirts creates an artificial storm, churning the water into a frothy white chaos. They do not float. They fly just inches above the surface, smashing through the swells that would capsize a smaller boat. The ocean boils in their wake. The battery commander in the primary dune bunker slams his hand onto the plotting table. He screams the coordinates into the handset, his voice cracking against the overwhelming noise of the approaching turbines. He orders the illumination rounds immediately. Artillery guns stationed on the high ridge boom in unison. The ground jumps. Shells whistle overhead, tearing through the heavy air with a shriek. They burst high above the water, suspending burning magnesium flares under parachutes. The artificial suns drift down, casting harsh, flickering shadows over the incoming monsters. The light reveals the wet steel armor of the hovercraft, glistening with sea spray. They are ugly, angular beasts, their open decks packed with battle tanks and hundreds of infantry troops huddled against the wind. The lead vessel is a fortress in motion, its bow wave rising 20 feet into the air. The noise becomes a physical force. The turbine scream vibrates in the teeth of the defenders. Sand dances on the floor of the bunkers. On the deck of the lead hovercraft, a ramp commander signals. The massive machine accelerates. The sheer displacement of air flattens the waves ahead of it. It acts as a battering ram of steel and noise, aimed directly at the center of the beach. The defenders grip their rifles. Knuckles turn white. The invasion has arrived. 0507 hours. Ridgeline Alpha, overlooking the invasion beach. The tall, razor-edged kunai grass whips violently, flattened by the sudden downdraft. Behind the volcanic rock wall, the air pressure changes abruptly. The rhythmic thumping of rotor blades beats against the chest, faster and more aggressive than the turbines below. Dust and loose gravel rise in a choking brown cloud. From the concealment of the tree line, a flight of 4 attack helicopters surges upward. They crest the ridge in a predatory arc, their black silhouettes cutting sharp lines against the brightening sky. The machines hang there for a split second, noses angled down, sensors rotating like insect eyes as they scan the bay. Inside the lead cockpit, the gunner stares into a monochromatic display. The crosshairs snap onto the heat bloom of the lead heavy hovercraft. His thumb flips the safety cover on the cyclic stick. He squeezes the trigger. The rails beneath the stub wings ignite. Guided missiles streak forward, riding pillars of white fire. The smoke trails draw straight geometric lines through the misty air. connecting the helicopters to the ships in the water. The sound of the launch is a sharp, tearing hiss that momentarily overpowers the roar of the invasion fleet. The first missile slams into the superstructure of the lead hovercraft. It does not just explode, it dissects the vessel. The warhead punches through the aluminum bridge, detonating inside the command center. A sphere of orange fire expands outward, blowing the reinforced glass windows into millions of glittering shards. The roof of the bridge peels back like the lid of a tin can, twisting and blackening in the heat. The second missile strikes the rear propulsion housing. The impact shears the massive starboard lift fan off its mount. The 3-ton composite blade spins free, a buzzsaw of destruction. It slices through the engine cowling and chops into the deck below. Fuel lines rupture. Jet fuel sprays across the open cargo bay in a high-pressure mist, igniting instantly. The effect on the hovercraft is catastrophic. The cushion of air supporting the 500-ton beast vanishes on the right side. The vessel loses its buoyancy. The starboard hull catches the water at 50 knots. The ocean acts like a concrete wall. The hovercraft violently decelerates, the nose digging deep into a wave. Physics takes over. The sudden stop catapults everything on the deck forward. Battle tanks parked on the cargo deck break their securing chains. The steel links snap with the sound of pistol shots. The 60-ton armored vehicles slide uncontrollably across the slick metal plating, smashing into the forward ramp. One tank tips over the edge, plunging into the churning sea, taking its crew down into the darkness. Infantry soldiers, exposed and unprepared for the collision, are hurled through the air. They strike bulkheads, vehicles, and railings. Helmets fly off. Bodies tumble across the wet steel, limbs flailing before skidding into the fuel fires now raging near the stern. The screams of the wounded mix with the shrieking of tearing metal and the roar of the still spinning port turbine. The remaining 2 hovercraft in the formation veer wildly to avoid the wreck. Their pilots fight the controls, the massive rudders swinging hard. They drift sideways, their skirts spraying massive walls of water over the burning remains of the lead ship. The organized wedge formation disintegrates into chaos. High above, the flight leader of the attack squadron banks hard to the left. He keys his radio, his voice flat and professional amidst the carnage below. He calls for guns. The helicopters dip their noses further. They align their 30mm chain guns with the exposed decks of the surviving vessels. The slaughter is about to begin. 0510 hours. Hovercraft Bravo, 400 meters offshore. Black smoke from the destroyed lead vessel drifts across the water, creating a blinding, oily fog. The remaining 2 heavy hovercraft struggle in the turbulent surf. Their engines scream as the pilots attempt to regain forward momentum. On the open decks, infantry officers shout orders, pointing their rifles toward the sky. Soldiers scramble over the wet plating, diving behind the thick steel hulls of the battle tanks chained to the deck. The air vibrates. The attack helicopters dive. They drop from the sky like stones, pulling out just 50 feet above the wavetops. Under the chin of the lead aircraft, the 30mm chain gun swivels. The electric motor spins the barrel cluster. It blurs into motion. The gun erupts. A 3-foot flame spits from the muzzle. The sound is a rhythmic, heavy thudding. Doof, 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 doof. Slow enough to hear individual shots, fast enough to create a wall of lead. High explosive rounds impact the water first, walking a line of geysers toward the ship. Then they hit metal. The 30mm shells hammer the aluminum deck of Hovercraft Bravo. The impacts sound like sledgehammers striking a hollow oil drum. The rounds punch through the deck plating, exploding inside the cargo bay. Shrapnel sprays upward through the floor. The defensive sandbags lining the rails disintegrate, exploding into clouds of dust and plastic shreds. The stream of fire tracks left. It saws through the massive black rubber skirt inflating the starboard side. The thick composite rubber rips open. Pressurized air escapes with a deafening whistle. The side of the hovercraft collapses, dropping 10 feet instantly. The hull slams into the ocean surface. A wave washes over the gunwale, sweeping 3 soldiers into the sea. The chain gun adjusts its aim. It walks the fire across the huddled infantry. Rounds strike the armored vehicles. Sparks shower the deck as the depleted uranium cores shatter against the turret armor. But the soldiers hiding behind them are not safe. Ricochets whine off the steel, cutting through the air at waist height. A heavy machine gun crate is struck. It explodes into splinters. The soldiers behind it jerk violently and fall. A fuel drum strapped to the rear of a truck ruptures. Diesel sprays onto the hot engine block. A fireball rolls across the rear deck, engulfing the ammunition crates stacked there. Small arms ammunition begins to cook off, popping like firecrackers in the heart of the inferno. The helicopter pilot kicks his rudder pedal. The aircraft slides sideways, maintaining its nose on the target while circling the wounded beast. Empty brass casings rain down from the helicopter, clinking onto the deck of the hovercraft below. The gunner does not pause. He depresses the trigger again. The stream of tracers chews through the radar mast, toppling the spinning dish onto the bridge. Glass shatters. Metal screams. The invasion force is being dismantled, piece by piece. 0512 hours. Starboard gun tub. Hovercraft Charlie. The third vessel in the formation fights through the swells, its engines straining to push past the burning wreckage of its sister ships. On the forward deck, a gunner straps himself into the harness of the rotary cannon. Sea spray drenches his uniform. He grips the dual control spades, his knuckles white. The targeting monitor jitters violently as the ship bounces over the wave. He sees the black shape of an attack helicopter, banking low over the water, its belly exposed. He squeezes the firing butterfly triggers. The 6 barrels of the rotary cannon spin. They blur into a gray haze. The weapon emits a terrifying, continuous roar, like heavy canvas tearing at high speed. A solid beam of green tracer rounds erupts from the muzzle. The stream of lead saws through the air, curving upward toward the helicopter. The helicopter pilot reacts instantly. The aircraft snaps into a hard right bank, the rotor blades biting the air. Flares burst from the tail boom. Dozens of magnesium decoys burn white hot, creating a confusing spiderweb of smoke and heat signatures. The stream of tracer fire slashes through the smoke, missing the cockpit glass by inches. It clips the skid landing gear, sparking wildly. But the aircraft rolls away, disappearing behind the smokescreen of the burning lead ship. The hovercraft gunner screams in frustration, tracking the barrel left to find a new target. But the pilot in the bridge is blind. The thick black smoke from hovercraft Bravo envelops them entirely. He cannot see the waves. He cannot see the other ships. He yanks the wheel hard to port to avoid the incoming fire, overcorrecting the drift. The massive vessel slides sideways across the water at 40 knots. It skids uncontrollably. Hovercraft Charlie slams into the side of the crippled hovercraft Bravo. The impact is seismic. The sound is the shriek of torture. Thousands of tons of aluminum and steel collide. The bow of Charlie pierces the soft flank of Bravo, cutting deep into the cargo bay. Metal buckles and folds like wet cardboard. The reinforced rubber skirts shred instantly, deflating in a violent hiss of escaping pressure. The sudden deceleration hurls the gunner from his seat. He smashes against the steel aiming ring. On the cargo decks, the collision is lethal. Armored vehicles are jolted from their positions, grinding against each other with a screech of stripping gears. Soldiers caught between the hulls are crushed instantly. The force of the impact snaps the keel of hovercraft Bravo. The vessel breaks its back. The center section sags into the ocean, seawater rushing in to mix with the burning fuel. Troops on the upper decks lose their footing. They slide down the tilting metal surfaces, clawing uselessly at smooth, wet steel. They tumble over the railings, splashing into the oil-slicked, churning gap between the 2 grinding hulls. The water turns red. The attack helicopters circle back. They hover casually now, watching the 2 giants destroy each other. The invasion force is no longer a fleet. It is a pile of scrap metal grinding itself to pieces in the surf. OD5 15 hours. Surf zone. 50 meters from shore. The entangled metal giants groan. The sound of tearing aluminum echoes over the water as Hovercraft Charlie reverses its pitch. The massive turbines roar at maximum RPM, shaking the vessel violently. With a sickening screech of stripping metal, Charlie tears itself free from the sinking carcass of Hovercraft Bravo. Debris rains down into the water. The third ship is wounded. Its port side is crumpled, the skirt shredded, listing heavily to the left. But the engines are still running. The pilot in the bridge makes a desperate decision. He jams the throttles forward to the stops. The hovercraft lurches toward the beach. It does not glide, it plows. The damaged hull smashes through the breaking waves, throwing up a chaotic spray of white water and black oil. It is a controlled crash. The distance closes rapidly. 40 meters. 20. 10. The hovercraft hits the beach. There is no graceful landing. The flat bottom strikes the wet sand at 30 knots. The momentum carries the 500-ton vessel forward, grinding over the dunes. Sand sprays 50 feet into the air. The sudden friction acts as a brake. The ship shudders to a violent halt, digging a trench deep into the coastline. The impact throws every standing soldier to the deck. Inside the cargo bay, securing chains groan under the strain. The huge bow ramp unlatches. It slams down onto the sand with a heavy, metallic clang. "Go! Go!" officers scream, kicking soldiers toward the opening. Infantrymen stumble down the corrugated metal ramp, boots slipping on the slick surface. They sprint toward the tree line, rifles held high. Armored vehicles rev their engines inside the dark bay, tracks spinning as they try to gain traction to exit. High above, the flight leader watches the ramp drop. He toggles the weapon selector switch. Rocket pods. The attack helicopters do not miss. They ripple fire the unguided rockets. The launch tubes flash rapidly, spitting smoke. Dozens of 70mm warheads streak downward in a chaotic swarm. The beach vanishes. The rockets impact the sand directly in front of the open ramp. The ground erupts. A wall of high explosives and fragmentation detonates instantly. Wet sand, shrapnel, and fire mix into a lethal slurry. The first wave of sprinting soldiers disappears inside the explosions. Bodies are tossed into the air like rag dolls, twisting in the shockwave. A rocket strikes the hydraulic arm of the ramp. It shears the metal pin. The heavy steel door twists, jamming halfway up, trapping the remaining vehicles inside. The exit is now a choke point. Smoke rolls into the open cargo bay, choking the men trapped inside the iron belly of the beached whale. The invasion has hit a dead end. 05:20 hours. The dune line, overlooking the wreckage. The beach is a graveyard of burning metal and churned sand. Thick, oily black smoke rolls off the beached hovercraft Charlie, mixing with the morning sea mist to create a suffocating gray twilight. Visibility drops to near zero. Inside this artificial fog, the surviving infantry from the invasion force crawl on their stomachs. They drag wounded comrades behind the crushed steel of the landing ramp. The air smells of ozone, cordite, and roasted meat. The ocean tide begins to lap at the boots of the dead scattered along the surf line. On the high ridge, the defensive commander watches the thermal feed. The invasion momentum is broken. He speaks one word into his headset. Engage. The sand dunes come alive. Camouflage netting is thrown back. Concrete firing ports open. Heavy machine guns, silent until this moment, open fire. The sound is a continuous, ripping canvas noise. Lines of red tracer rounds slash through the smoke, converging on the trapped soldiers on the beach. The crossfire is mathematically precise. Bullets chew up the sand, kicking up dirt into the eyes of the survivors. A squad of invaders attempts to rally behind the massive rubber skirt of the hovercraft. They set up a light machine gun. The gunner fires blindly into the dunes, but the cover offers no protection. A heavy caliber round punches through the rubber, tumbling as it exits. It strikes the gunner in the chest. His body jerks backward, slamming into the wet aluminum hull. The weapon falls silent. Above the slaughter, the attack helicopters shift tactics. They no longer dive. They hover at 1,000 feet, circling slowly like vultures. The pilots switch their optics to black-hot thermal imaging. Through the smoke, the heat signatures of the survivors glow like white ghosts against the cool background of the wet sand. The lead pilot spots a group of officers shouting into radios near the rear tracks of the hovercraft. He taps the cyclic stick gently. The nose of the helicopter drifts 2 degrees right. The 30mm cannon tracks with the movement. He fires a short burst. 5 rounds. The high explosive shells land in the center of the group. The explosion tosses bodies outward in a starburst pattern. Radios, maps, and limbs are scattered across the tide line. The command structure is decapitated. Inside the belly of the beached hovercraft, the crew of the lead battle tank fights against panic. The vehicle is trapped behind the jammed ramp. The commander screams for the driver to pivot. The tank lurches, its tracks screeching on the metal deck, crushing the crates of supplies packed around it. The turret rotates. The main gun boom swings toward the dunes. The tank fires. The 120mm cannon blast overpressures the enclosed cargo bay. The concussion wave ruptures the eardrums of every infantryman still inside the ship. Dust shakes loose from the ceiling rafters, but the shot is useless. The angle of the ship is too steep. The shell screams over the heads of the defenders, detonating harmlessly a mile inland in the empty jungle. The defensive heavy machine guns shift their fire to the open cargo bay. Rounds spark off the tank's thick frontal armor, but tear through the exposed hydraulic lines and fuel jerry cans stored along the walls. A fuel fire ignites inside the ship. The orange glow illuminates the interior. The trapped soldiers scream as the flames cut off their only exit. The metal whale has become an oven. The remaining invaders on the beach throw down their weapons. Hands go up. They kneel in the bloody sand, heads bowed, waiting for the mercy that may not come. 05:30 hours. The coastline. The sun finally breaches the horizon, burning through the lingering sea mist. The harsh morning light reveals the full scale of the devastation. The beach is no longer a battlefield. It is a scrapyard. The roar of turbines and the crack of gunfire have been replaced by the crackle of cooling metal and the hiss of waves hitting hot steel. A thick column of black smoke rises vertically from the beached hovercraft Charlie, staining the pristine blue sky. The air is still, heavy with the stench of burnt diesel and copper blood. On the shoreline, the surf washes over the debris field. Helmets, life jackets, and ration packs bob in the foam. The hull of hovercraft Bravo, the vessel involved in the collision, finally gives up the fight. With a deep, groaning shudder, the stern lifts toward the sky. Trapped air escapes in massive, violent bubbles that disturb the surface. The ship slides backward, slipping beneath the oil-slicked water. It disappears into the deep trench of the ocean floor, dragging the chained wreckage of its battle tanks down with it. Only a swirling vortex of dirty water remains to mark its grave. On the black sand, the fighting has ended. Defenders emerge from their dune bunkers. They move slowly, weapons lowered but ready. They walk past the craters left by the rocket barrage. The surviving invaders are lined up near the tide line. They are stripped of their tactical vests and helmets. Their uniforms are soaked, torn, and covered in sand. They kneel with hands interlaced behind their heads. A medic moves down the line, applying tourniquets to bleeding limbs. There is no shouting now, only the quiet, efficient commands of the capturing force. Overhead, the attack helicopters reform their flight element. They perform one final low pass over the beach. The rotor wash kicks up a fresh spray of sand, stinging the faces of the prisoners. The pilots inspect their work. Satisfied that no threats remain, the flight leader banks the formation sharply to the west. They head back toward the ridge, their silhouettes shrinking against the brightening sun. The battery commander stands on the edge of the cratered dune. He lowers his binoculars. He keys his radio handset. Target destroyed. Sector secure. He releases the button. He looks down at the burning hulk of the hovercraft on the beach. The fire inside the cargo bay has died down, leaving only the charred skeleton of the vehicle. The ocean waves continue to crash against the steel flank, indifferent to the violence. The tide is coming in, beginning to wash the red stains from the black sand.